I'm applying to work at I'm applying to work at Obsidian, which is a pretty competitive role. They only have 3 engineers so far, hiring a fourth. I'm curious about learning more about Obsidian. I'm curious about the learning process. My major in college was learning and education studies with a concentration in applied learning science. Pretty much, I majored in learning how to learn. I'm applying to Obsidian because I'm curious how I can extend this process through their materials, through their media. I'm considering software through the lens of materials science because I'm curious about going to grad school. What can I build to stand out beyond the projects that I've been working on for decades now? Technically decades, at least 1 decade. I know I can make videos and summarize them, and I'm curious how this medium relates to the ways I structure my thoughts into text. One of the projects I've been working on for a while might be described as a cognitive systems language. It's called Swoop. Recently, I've been developing a workbench meant to consolidate runtime packages, language server protocols, and extensions for IDEs. Not language server protocols. I guess there's one language server protocol, but implementations towards various dimensions of that protocol. The role that I'm applying to is pretty competitive, and I'm going to entertain the delusion of getting hired because I actually do want to work here. Not that I don't want to work in other places, but other places feel more like I'd be entertaining the concept of abstract engineering rather than wanting to develop a product for a specific purpose. I'm curious about Obsidian from the perspective of a learning scientist with the lens of material science. And I'm curious about describing this and building plugins to integrate Swoop, which likely means developing a Swoop to Markdown publishing pipeline and considering different rendering targets, extending some wonder from January about how I might design a front end to interact with Swoop. Cheers! I've had a hard time making my work visible over the past few years. Not because I haven't been able to do the things that, how do I describe this? I kind of don't want to in this video. Environmentally, it's been difficult to describe how all of the stuff I've been working on fits together. Partially because so many of our systems are changing with AI that pointing towards a future fundamentally involves describing how structures might not be as relevant for the newer direction. Is that how I want to say it? The easiest way to describe this is if it were up to me, I would have a mural behind me because art motivates me and makes it easier for me to look forward to tomorrow. And also, I've found new ways to look forward to tomorrow. And also, I think software engineering as an industry can adjust a little bit, maybe like 2%, which might sound like a lot and might be a lot. What would it look like for software engineering as an industry to be 2% better? And how much can that improve other industries? I'm trying to polish my profile so I can submit it to a specific job, and I'm aware of how much work I've been doing over the past few years that has been building up to something I can't demonstrate. I can demonstrate the skills that I've developed, sure, and it would be nice to be able to show off the projects that I was working on. In January, I spent $200 in extra usage on Claude Code. I didn't expect to, otherwise I would have gotten the Max 20X plan. I think the Max 20X plan is $200. But I designed a front end for Swoop, which is a language I've been developing for about a decade. And the interface isn't very good. It has a lot of cool ideas, but it's brittle in ways that are hard to adjust with respect to where I want to go with Swoop. I'm describing a relationship with interface design and application programming interfaces. When I'm designing Swoop, how do I want developers to actually interface with the construct so they can build interfaces? Also, how does this relate to linguistics and interpretation? In February, I moved on to developing more of the language server protocol, more of the Swoop binding to the language server protocol, and extensions for IntelliJ and VS Code. And that got me thinking, if we already have Markdown and Markdown editors and ecosystems that are meant to extend the relationship between AI, humans, and the file formats we can use between us, if those already exist and they are meant to be accessible to people who don't necessarily write code, why am I designing Swoop to be for an audience who wouldn't care about its details? Am I trying to make Swoop friendly for people who aren't trying to be developers, or for people who aren't interested in nuanced structure of their thoughts? I don't really have an answer for that right now. I can describe that I make videos and there's an audience who watches them, and I can turn these videos into text by asking Gemini to transcribe them. So that's possible, but which structures do I actually care about? And how do we describe which structures we want to make meaningful? When I was in college, I founded a student organization called Student Body for Meaningful Education. The point was to explore the meaning of our education through 3 committees: discussion, connection, and creation. I had an idea of supporting this organization more specifically because I recognized its absence on campus, and I wanted to do this with the resources of someone who was employed full-time working on campus. Then I got hired in Chicago, then COVID, and I learned a lot about which structures make remote work possible. Working at various companies and having conversations with dozens of business owners, seeing which projects actually developed over years, collaborating with authors on book talk and trying to ship products. Some have been successful and others have been frustrating. Some of the successful ones have been frustrating, and, it is what it is. I've been making videos today because I know I can wonder how to structure these thoughts towards an application, like towards a job application. And while I'm applying specifically to Obsidian, who is hiring their 4th engineer, I know that role is going to be competitive, and I want to be mindful of setting my expectations to be realistic, while also having fun entertaining fun delusions. I don't want that to go into a place where, groundedness is still relevant to me. And with that, I can wonder about the concept of groundedness. I can wonder about how we're describing that industrially, and try to connect that to our education system, and wonder if there are opportunities to use Obsidian as an educational tool specifically. Yes, there are. People have been doing this for years. And if I wonder about it, I'll wonder about it with the context of my ecosystem, like my software development ecosystem and the people who follow me on TikTok and YouTube. By describing over several videos that I want to work for Obsidian, I'm sure more people will consider the app. And I hope to draw attention to the ways they've been designing the CLI, to the ways the Obsidian team has been developing the features in a modern context with modern technology. I'm curious about how the Obsidian team structures engineering around AI and what the communication flow looks like. I'm particularly curious about the pacing of communication and where ideas crystallize. And with this, I'm going to be exploring the physical chemistry model of the philosophy behind Swoop. This is the space where I think my ideas and work over the past several years are particularly novel, exploring software engineering more from the frame of materials science than linguistics, exploring the linguistics of software engineering with the lens of physics and materials. And part of the context here is I believe people are going to have relationships with the patterns of AI like we have relationships with the patterns of fashion. Why would I ask Claude to implement a feature versus Codex? Sometimes it's because I want to have a different shape of conversation while I'm streaming and talking through a concept live on TikTok. Other times, I appreciate being able to pause and read through a plan that's structured like how Claude outputs it, and I also appreciate the taste of Codex. Not the flavor of Codex. I appreciate the reasons Codex makes many architectural decisions. Today, I thought that I would write more code, and I don't believe more code would clarify my relationship to direction. Not today. I do plan on writing code later this evening and having conversations with my team to try to synchronize a broader ecosystem direction. And I haven't checked in with everyone on my team this week, so if they're available, I'd like to have a conversation with them before, well, yeah, basically. I can keep track of my own progress, and I understand that other people are working on other projects. When it's easier for us to describe what we're working on, it's easier for us all to extend the parts that feel relevant. Although sometimes we are in our own bubble. And that isn't necessarily bad. I mean, it isn't bad. Sometimes it doesn't make it easier for us to share progress, and if the goal is shared progress, then not having those conversations impedes progress. But also, what is progress in this context, etc.? I am trying to get a consistent income, trying to get consistent income. That's a goal of mine. And also, I want to work for Obsidian. And also, I'm planning on using this application process to describe how I would apply to a job so my team knows how I would apply to a job. Describing this way has helped multiple people enter senior positions in their careers. I want to be mindful that I'm describing how a junior engineer can start making videos and exploring code and exploring structure and forming communities and finding companies that they want to work for and developing relationships with curricula towards the idea of meaningful education being relevant. I wonder how to stand out when I apply to Obsidian, and I'm curious about that. I can upload this video to YouTube and ask Gemini to summarize it and have conversations with ChatGPT about how this particular role would align with my broader career goals. Being able to afford grad school would be really, really, really cool. And I have time for that. I don't mind. If I'm going to be learning anyway, grad school isn't necessarily necessary towards the things that I can accomplish on my own. And eventually, I understand that I'll run into network or resource constraints as an individual. Now, I want to extend my ecosystem. I want to extend the wonder that I can offer in the context of a disciplined engineering team. My opinion about the previous two places that I worked, both places less than 90 days, not necessarily relevant. Oh, the engineering that I've seen from Obsidian points to an amount of rigor that I find compelling. Rigor, discipline, not sure what you would call it. I'm curious. Otherwise, production is still on my mind. I've been having conversations with authors and illustrators, and there is progress towards a show structure. I'm curious where and how Obsidian can fit into show production. Where in the writer's room does Obsidian fit? And on that, I think Obsidian as a structure, as an organization, company, with respect to all of the change that's happening in other industries, I think Obsidian is positioned pretty well to respond to the kinds of needs that humans have expressed. I actually do want this job specifically, and I like the idea of working in software engineering, and I'm disappointed in the quality of the current culture. The best I think I can do is lead by example, and the best I believe I can do is learn. Cheers. Damn, that post got 2 million views. This role is going to be a competitive role to apply to. Wowee. How can I stand out? Hire me because I have a TikTok following. Give me $20,000 and I'll double your revenue. Not as a salary, I mean like as a budget. Marketing budget? I've been applying to principal and senior software engineering roles, describing that we need to be able to communicate with this medium. I believe Obsidian is a necessary tool for the modern era. I can point to the literacy crises and describe that we're losing structures in common, but also the engineering culture seems relevant and important. It's easy to talk about what's going wrong, but I can apply to Obsidian and describe that this is the kind of process I believe we should be moving towards. Might the interview process surprise me? Yeah, maybe. And if I talk about it, then we can have a discussion about where we are as an industry. I'm wondering how to stand out. And I can continue developing the projects I've been working on for a while. The main one is a language called Swoop, and I'm integrating that into factshift.com, texture.website, and lore.land. Stay tuned. Cheers. Pretty much, I think lore.land and obsidian.md could work out pretty well together. Is there more that I can say? There's more that I could probably build, and I'm tempted to, but I'm not sure what the. Ooh. Rather synchronize that to the actual taste of the engineers who currently work for Obsidian. If you've played Minecraft, then you can kind of see where I'm going with this idea, though. What if the knowledge represented by our markdown files could represent some sort of material? I've described this in other videos, and I understand that hooks to other videos need to be present if multiple videos are created. Kind of like backlinks between markdown files. I want to describe design awareness and engineering proficiency. A lot of engineers get started with engineering by modding Minecraft, and this builds familiarity with the concept of Obsidian. If I tell the story of applying to Obsidian as part of my founder arc, where I say, yeah, I founded lore.land, and also I want to work for Obsidian. Where can that go? Where can that go? Cheers.